Um, Next, we have Dr. T. Ganesh from ATRI, who's again speaking on a very lesser known group, the Harriers, which he has monitored with the help of a large team at their roost for long-term trends. He's going to talk about citizen involvement and long-term trends by monitoring Harriers. Please play the video.
Hello everyone. My talk today is going to be on monitoring harriers at their roost sites, and based on that, some of the trends that we have seen in the last couple of years, and also how to involve citizens in such an approach. Very quickly about communal roosts. As most of you know, these are spectacular places to watch birds, not only birds but also bats. The large numbers congregate together, and this also gives an opportunity to estimate their population trend if done systematically and regularly. Grasslands is another major roosting places, but this is often ignored. Many of the species that roost in such grasslands are very cryptic: pipits, larks, harriers, and short-eared owl, and others. Harriers, as you know, require such open grasslands not only for roosting but also for foraging, and counting them at their roost site is a good way to monitor their trend at a particular place. So why strictly harriers? Because their counts have been declining at several roost sites across India. These are two prominent sites. But one issue with these is that there is no species-wise trend, and so we don't know which species are decreasing, which species are stable, or whether any species are increasing. So we try to address this issue by looking at the behavior of the harriers at the roost. There are three distinct events during a roosting of a harrier. One is pre-roosting, which happens about 2 to 3 hours before sunset. Small groups of birds gather in small patches around the major roost, followed by the spectacular milling, which many of you would have seen, where most of the birds that come to roost are up in the air and looking for a predator or the best site to roost. So this happens at dusk, and as soon it's followed by roosting. So milling is one thing that one could easily count, but this often is not the total counts. So we tried to see what is the relationship between total counts and milling counts. For that, we used smaller roosts with less than 15 birds, where we can get the actual count, the total counts of the birds in the roost, and also when they mill, we can get the milling count. So we found that these are very strongly related, and by estimating or by counting the numbers during milling, we can get an estimate of the total counts of birds at a particular roost. So this is a general relationship between milling counts and total counts. So we use this approach across several sites in India. It was done over 5 years, across several seasons as well. So at each site, we were there about 2 to 3 hours before sunset. This helped us to identify species because in good light you can not only identify species but age them, sex them, and also gives you an idea of how many birds are arriving at the roost, which in the end it could help us to get their total count. Quickly, some results. These are total number of harriers of Montagus and Pallets across 3 regions and 3 seasons. Autumn is a very important region for the harriers in Western India. And for Montagu harriers, Southern India, the numbers are quite high, both during winter and spring, whereas in Pallet, they are high in autumn in Deccan. And generally, Pallet harriers are more common in the Deccan region than in the southern region. So the trend of all these harriers across years has shown uh, quite a bit of a decline in the last couple of years. So even this year, 2021, which is not shown here, so there is a general negative trend here. So the other issue with such counts is, of course, when birds move between roosting sites. So for this, we try to look at tagged harriers, which were part of the larger program on understanding the migratory behavior of harriers, pallid and montagus. And we found that in areas where the grassland is isolated, just like is the map on the right side, Vale of Dar, but there are no major roost around the sanctuary. We found that most of the birds are confined to the sanctuary and spend the time within the area. So there is not much of movement between roosts in such areas, but in areas where there are patchy grasslands, as you can see, the red dot is the roost. Surrounding is those yellow patches are small patches of grasslands. This is in southern Tamil Nadu near Tirunelveli, and one of our tagged harrier, which is a Montagu male, used about 6 to 7 roosts in that area over a period of 3 months. So definitely multiple roosts are used here, and this is an issue because how do we address this? And one way of doing that was to look at um, all possible roosts around the major roost and do a roost count at each one of them. As you can imagine, this is it's a lot of work. Can't be done in a small team, and that is when we thought of involving reaching out to citizens to do a synchronous count of birds in that area, the Nelveli area. We did this last February, where we identified 21 roost sites, and 30 volunteers helped us to count these birds over 2 days, and we arrived at a mean count of 109 birds in the roughly 2,200 square kilometer area. Interestingly, only 50% of these roost sites had birds on those 2 days. So such an approach, we feel, will be useful in areas where there are multiple roosts or there are small patchy patches of grassland where the harriers might be roosting, and can also involve volunteers from those areas. But one caveat is that these volunteers have to be cautioned not to disturb the birds at the roost. Roost places are very sensitive, and birds abandon these places when you go very close to them. So there needs to be some amount of training, not only in identifying the birds, but also how they approach the roost and how they count the birds. So I come to my end of my talk. Would acknowledge the support from Department of Science and Technology, Breaks India, and Sundaram Finance. The permissions from the Forest Department of several states, several volunteers, and I'm very thankful for the organizers for inviting me to share my work on harriers. Thank you very much. If you need some more information, you can go up this website, harrierwatch.a3.org. I'm open for questions now.
Thank you, Ganesh. It's really good to have you here today. And it's really fascinating how all this work over last decade or so has resulted in significant insights into population biology of